The night was colder than death itself. Snow covered everything like a white blanket, and the wind howled through the cracks of an old wooden cabin standing alone in the mountains. Inside, a man named Ethan Cole sat near a dying fire. His hands trembled as he rubbed them together for warmth. The woodpile beside him was almost empty. He had been living alone for months. No visitors, no neighbors, no hope. The world outside had changed since the alien war 5 years ago. The skies were no longer safe, and the stars that once looked peaceful now reminded him of battles, screams, and fire raining down from ships that weren't human. Ethan took a sip of cold coffee, staring at the flickering flames. His face was tired, his eyes heavy with memories he couldn't forget. He used to be an engineer, a good one, until the war took everything. His home, his wife, his son, all gone. Only this cabin and silence remained. Then came the knock. A sharp, desperate sound cut through the night. Knock! 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 Ethan froze. His heart skipped. No one ever came here. No one should even know this place existed. He grabbed the old rifle from beside the wall and slowly moved toward the door. The wind whistled through the cracks as another knock echoed, weaker this time, like someone was losing strength. "Who's there?" Ethan shouted. No answer. Only the wind. He waited. The fire crackled. Then a faint voice on a soft trembling came from the other side. "Please open the door." It was a woman's voice, but there was something strange about it. Too calm, too smooth, almost. Melodic. Ethan hesitated. It could be a trap. Bandits sometimes use tricks like that. Or worse. Aliens still hiding after the war. His finger rested on the trigger. "Go away," he warned. "You don't want to be here." The voice came again, weaker. "I'll die if you don't let me in. Please, it's so cold." Something inside Ethan shifted. He knew what dying in the cold felt like. He had seen enough frozen bodies on the battlefield. With a heavy sigh, he unbolted the door and pulled it open. A wave of icy air burst in, snow swirling around his feet. And there, standing in the storm, one was a woman, but she didn't look normal. Her skin shimmered faintly like silver dust under moonlight. Her eyes glowed a soft blue and tiny crystals formed in her white hair. She was wearing torn fabric that looked nothing like human clothes. Ethan froze. His breath caught. "You're not human." She looked up at him, her lips pale and trembling. "No, but I mean no harm." She took a shaky step forward and almost collapsed. Ethan caught her just in time, feeling how cold her skin was, colder than the snow itself. She whispered, her voice fading. "Please, share your warmth, or I'll freeze." Ethan stared at her, torn between fear and pity. The war had taught him to hate aliens. They had killed millions. But this one, she looked terrified, fragile, dying. He pulled her inside and shut the door against the storm. She collapsed near the fire, her glowing eyes half open. Ethan hesitated, then threw 2 more logs into the fire. She whispered again, voice soft as wind. "Thank you, human," and fell unconscious. Ethan stood there, rifle still in his hand, staring at her strange silver skin. His mind raced. Was she one of the enemy? A spy? A survivor? Outside, the storm roared louder. The temperature kept dropping. Ethan sat by the fire, watching her sleep, unsure if he had just saved a life or invited danger into his home. Then, as the flames danced across her face, he saw something that froze his blood. A faint blue mark glowing on her wrist. He had seen that mark before. It was the same symbol worn by the alien soldiers who destroyed his town. Ethan's grip on the rifle tightened. He had just brought one of them into his cabin, and she was sleeping by his fire. The storm raged outside, shaking the cabin's thin walls. Snow piled up against the windows, and the fire struggled to stay alive. Ethan sat in silence, the rifle resting across his knees. His eyes never left the strange woman lying near the fire. Her skin shimmered in the orange glow like melted silver. Her breathing was slow but steady now. The faint blue mark on her wrist glowed brighter with every heartbeat, the same mark he had seen on alien soldiers during the war. He couldn't stop staring at it. That mark had haunted his dreams for years. It was the sign of the Aurelians, the alien race that started the invasion. They came to Earth claiming peace, but peace turned to destruction. They had burned his city, taken his family, and left him with nothing. And now one of them was sleeping in his cabin. Ethan's hand tightened on the rifle. He could end it right now. One pull of the trigger and she'd be gone. No more questions. No more danger. but something inside him stopped him. Maybe it was the memory of her weak voice outside the door. Maybe it was the way she had begged, not as a warrior, but as someone scared of dying. He sighed and lowered the gun. The fire cracked softly. The alien woman stirred, her lips moving slightly. Then slowly her eyes opened, glowing a faint icy blue. "Where am I?" she whispered. Ethan stood, keeping distance. "You're in my cabin," he said firmly. "You almost froze to death." She blinked, confused. "Cabin? Human shelter?" "Yes," he replied coldly. "Human shelter. And you're lucky I didn't throw you back into the storm." The woman tried to sit up but groaned in pain. Her hands trembled. Ethan noticed the frostbite on her fingers. Even her alien body wasn't built for this kind of cold. "What's your name?" he asked. She looked up, her eyes soft but wary. "My name is Lyra." "Lyra," he repeated. "You're Aurelian, aren't you?" Her expression changed. Fear flickered in her eyes. "You know my kind." "Oh, I know them," Ethan said bitterly. "Your kind destroyed everything. My home, my people, my son." Lyra's lips parted slightly. She looked down, her voice shaking. "Not all Aurelians wanted the war. Some of us tried to stop it." Ethan laughed bitterly. "That's what they all say." She looked up at him, tears forming in her glowing eyes. "I'm not your enemy, Ethan Cole." His body stiffened. "How do you know my name?" Lyra hesitated. "Because I was sent to find you." The air grew heavy. The fire popped, sending a spark into the darkness. Ethan took a step forward, rifle half raised. "Sent to find me? By who?" Lyra's voice trembled, but her words were calm. "By someone who believes humans and Aurelians can still save each other." He frowned. "Save each other? From what?" Lyra closed her eyes as if remembering something painful. "The war wasn't the end, Ethan. The destruction changed more than your world. It broke ours too. The cold storms you see, they're not natural. They're spreading because of what our technology did to your planet's core. Soon everything will freeze. Both worlds." Ethan stared at her. "You expect me to believe that?" She nodded weakly. "I came here with data, proof. But my ship crashed in the mountains. I barely escaped before it exploded. I've been walking in the snow for days, searching for you, for me." "Yes," Lyra whispered. "Because you once built something powerful. A machine that could turn energy into warmth. A stabilizer. You called it Project Ember." Ethan froze. He hadn't heard that name in years. It was his invention, the one that could have stopped the global cooling after the war. But the government shut it down when the Aurelians attacked. "How do you know about that?" he demanded. Lyra's voice grew faint. "Because it's the only hope left, and you're the only human who can finish it." For a long moment there was silence. Only the wind howled outside. Ethan lowered his weapon slowly, staring into her glowing eyes. He wanted to hate her, but something in her gaze looked honest. She shivered, her body shaking from cold. "Please," she whispered. "I don't have much time. I need your help, or both our worlds will die." Ethan turned to the fire, staring into the flames as the storm roared louder outside. Two worlds, one freezing to death, the other begging for warmth. He exhaled, his breath white in the cold air. "If you're lying," he said quietly, "I'll make sure you regret it." Lyra gave a weak nod. "Then let me prove I'm not." The wind screamed like a living thing, rattling the windows, and for the first time in years, Ethan realized he wasn't alone anymore. The storm finally began to calm by morning. Pale sunlight crept through the frost-covered windows, painting the cabin in shades of silver and blue. The fire had almost died, leaving a faint orange glow. Ethan sat by the window, watching the snow drift lazily in the cold air. He hadn't slept. His mind kept circling around Lyra's words. "Both our worlds will die." It sounded impossible, yet something in her eyes told him it wasn't a lie. Lyra lay wrapped in an old blanket near the fire. Her breathing had steadied, though her skin still shimmered faintly like ice touched by sunlight. She looked peaceful now, almost human, but every time Ethan saw that glowing mark on her wrist, anger twisted in his chest again. He whispered to himself, "Aurelian or not, she knows too much." When Lyra finally opened her eyes, she blinked at the dim light and tried to sit up. Her movements were slow but stronger than before. "You didn't leave me outside," she said softly. "I almost did," Ethan replied, his voice flat. "But I figured you'd freeze before you could tell me anything useful." Lyra gave a faint smile. Then I suppose I should thank you again. Human mercy is strange, he ignored the comment. You said your ship crashed where? 2 miles east of here, she said quietly. It's buried in the snow near the frozen lake. My data core is still inside. It has everything we need to stop the freeze. Ethan rubbed his forehead. And you expect me to just walk into a snowstorm for alien tech? Lyra looked at him, her expression steady. If you want to live. Yes, Ethan stared at her for a long moment, then sighed. Fine, but if this is some kind of trick. She finished his sentence softly. You'll shoot me. I know, he didn't answer. He grabbed his winter coat, an old scarf, and the rifle. Lyra stood, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. She seemed fragile, but there was a quiet strength in her movements, like someone used to surviving against impossible odds. The journey. The wind bit into their faces as they stepped outside. The forest was buried under white silence. Each breath turned to mist. Ethan led the way, his boots crunching in the deep snow. Lyra followed, her glowing eyes scanning the frozen world like she was seeing it for the first time. After some time, Ethan broke the silence. Why me? Out of all the humans alive, why find me? Lyra's voice was soft, almost carried away by the wind. Because your invention, Project Ember, was the only human creation that gave warmth without destroying energy. It could stabilize the balance between heat and cold. My people studied your work, secretly. He frowned. You studied it? During the war? Yes, she admitted. Even while the fighting continued, some of us wanted to learn, not conquer. You were the only human scientist we believed could save what was left of both worlds. Ethan shook his head. You killed my family. Lyra lowered her gaze. I didn't. But my kind did. And I can't erase that. All I can do is try to stop more deaths. The words hung in the frozen air. Ethan said nothing more. The crash site, after hours of walking, they reached the frozen lake. The wreck of Lyra's ship jutted out from the ice like the bones of a giant beast. The silver metal was twisted and burned, half buried under snow. A faint blue glow pulsed from cracks in the hull. Lyra hurried forward, her eyes wide with both pain and relief. It's still here. Ethan followed cautiously, rifle ready. That thing safe? Not exactly, she said. The power core's unstable. We need to get the data unit and leave before it collapses. She moved with surprising skill, pressing her palm against a smooth panel. It lit up, recognizing her touch. The hull opened with a low hiss, releasing a puff of icy vapor. Inside, strange lights blinked across alien consoles. The air smelled like ozone and metal. Ethan's breath caught. It was the first alien ship he had ever seen up close. The walls shimmered, almost alive, and the controls looked grown rather than built. Lyra reached toward a glowing cube embedded in the control panel. This is the data core, she said. Everything about the planetary freeze is in here. Just as she pulled it free, a deep vibration shook the wreck. The floor cracked beneath them. Move, Ethan shouted. They stumbled out as the ice groaned and split. The wreck sank slowly, steam rising as energy from the broken core met the freezing water below. They collapsed in the snow, gasping. Lyra clutched the glowing cube close to her chest. We have it, she breathed. Ethan turned his head to look at her. Her silver hair sparkled with frost, and her glowing eyes reflected the dying ship. What now? He asked. Lyra looked up at the sky. The sun was faint, pale, and weak. Now, she said quietly, we find a way to make your ember burn again. Ethan looked back at the sinking ship, then at the alien woman beside him. He didn't trust her. He didn't understand her, but for the first time in years he felt something new. Purpose. The sky had turned gray by the time Ethan and Lyra returned to the cabin. The storm clouds hung heavy like the world itself was holding its breath. Snow clung to their coats as they stumbled inside, slamming the door shut against the cold. Ethan dropped his rifle by the wall and sat down heavily. His hands shook from exhaustion. Lyra, clutching the glowing cube, knelt beside the fire and set it down carefully. The blue light from the data core reflected off her silver skin, making the small room look otherworldly. Ethan stared at the cube. That thing's the reason we almost froze to death? Lyra smiled faintly. It's also the reason we're still alive. Inside it is everything we need to restart Project Ember. Ethan frowned. That project was shut down years ago. The government destroyed the main stabilizer after the invasion. It can't be rebuilt with junk and firewood. Lyra tilted her head, a spark of confidence in her glowing eyes. You underestimate yourself, Ethan Cole. You built it once in a bunker with only half the equipment you needed. I've seen the blueprints. You can build it again? He raised an eyebrow. You read my classified files? Yes, she said softly. We studied everything about you. Not as an enemy, but as a possible savior. Ethan looked away. That's funny. Your people didn't treat us like they needed saving. Lyra didn't answer. She stared into the fire, the orange light flickering across her face. I can't change what was done, but I can help you fix what's coming. He sighed, leaning back. And what is coming exactly? Lyra placed her hand on the cube and a soft blue hologram projected into the air, spinning images of Earth and another planet, both surrounded by swirling rings of frost. Your world and mine share the same energy field, she explained. When our weapons collided during the war, they tore open the thermal balance between planets. Now both are losing heat faster than they can generate it. Soon everything, an ocean, cities, life, and will freeze solid. Ethan's heart sank. The projection showed massive ice storms sweeping across continents, swallowing cities whole. He whispered, "How long do we have?" Lyra looked down. "Weeks, maybe less. The storms will reach the equator soon." Ethan rubbed his face. "So the end of the world's on a timer. Great." Lyra's voice softened. "That's why we need Project Ember. If we can rebuild it, we can ignite the planetary core again, restore the balance." He stared at her. "That's not just science, that's madness, maybe," she said quietly. "But madness might be all we have left." The workshop of Hope Ethan spent the next few hours clearing space in the cabin. Old tools, wires, broken circuits. Everything he could find from his engineer's past was dragged out. Lyra helped, her movements graceful but precise. Every time her hands touched a piece of metal, a faint hum filled the air like her body carried its own energy. She noticed him watching. "Aurelian cells store light energy. It helps us survive in cold." "Must be nice," he muttered, wrapping a blanket tighter around himself. Lyra smiled faintly. "Humans survive in other ways. You build warmth even when surrounded by ice." Her words caught him off guard. For a moment he didn't know how to reply. Hours passed. Together they started assembling the first component, a small energy converter. Sparks flew as Ethan soldered wires, and Lyra adjusted readings on a floating hologram from the cube. "Careful," she said gently. "The energy is unstable." "I know," he replied. "So am I." She laughed softly, the first real sound of joy he'd heard in years. An unseen threat by nightfall, the converter finally hummed to life. A soft orange glow filled the cabin. Ethan wiped sweat from his brow. "It's working," Lyra smiled. "This is only the beginning. If we can amplify this energy, we might light the first ember." But just as hope began to rise, a sudden pulse of static filled the air. The blue cube flickered violently, the hologram glitching. Lyra's expression turned pale. "No," she whispered. "They found us," Ethan tensed. "Who?" "The hunters," she said. "Aurelian soldiers, the last ones loyal to the war command. They track energy signals from lost ships." Ethan grabbed his rifle. "How far?" "Not far enough," she said grimly. "They'll be here before dawn." Ethan looked at her. The fear in her eyes wasn't fake. He knew that look. It was the same one he'd seen in soldiers before a battle they couldn't win. He loaded the rifle and nodded. "Then we finish what we can, and fight when they arrive." Lyra's glowing eyes met his. "You'd fight your own nightmares." "For me?" Ethan hesitated. "For my world," he said. Then softer. "And maybe for you." Outside, the wind began to rise again. The snow howled like a warning from the mountains. Inside the cabin, the first spark of Project Ember burned, fragile, flickering, but alive. And somewhere in the frozen distance, shadows moved closer. The night outside the cabin was thick with silence, the kind that came before something terrible. The storm had faded, but the wind still whispered through the trees, carrying an eerie hum that didn't sound natural. Ethan stood near the window, his rifle gripped tight, eyes scanning the white wilderness. He could feel it, movement in the distance, shadows shifting beneath the snow. Lyra sat beside the glowing cube, her hands pressed against it, her silver skin dimming slightly. "They're close," she said softly. "Their scanners picked up my ship's energy trail." Ethan glanced at her. "How many are coming?" "3, maybe 4, she whispered. Elite trackers. They won't stop until they find me. Ethan tightened his jaw. Then we make sure they regret it. He turned toward his old workshop table, pulling out tools and spare parts. You said this converter can be weaponized, right? Lyra frowned. It's not meant for war. Nothing ever is, he muttered, connecting wires. But war finds us anyway. She watched him work, his rough human hands moving with precision, eyes focused, every motion driven by something deeper than survival. It wasn't hatred now. It was determination. After a moment, Lyra said softly, "You're not like the others I met in the war." He didn't look up. "That's because most of them are dead." Her voice trembled. "I'm sorry." Ethan paused, meeting her glowing blue eyes. "Don't be. Just help me make sure I'm not next." She nodded and placed her hand over the converter. Blue light pulsed through it, blending with his work. "Together, then," she said. "Together," he replied. The shadows in the snow hours later, the world outside had gone completely silent. Even the wind seemed afraid to move. The fire burned low in the cabin, casting long, flickering shadows across the walls. Ethan crouched by the door, rifle aimed, breath steady. Lyra stood near the table, holding the glowing cube, its light dimmed to avoid detection. Then came the sound. Faint footsteps crunching snow. Slow, heavy, measured. Ethan's heartbeat quickened. He raised the rifle slightly. Through the narrow window, he saw them. 3 tall figures wrapped in black armor that shimmered faintly under the moonlight. Their helmets glowed faint blue, just like Lyra's eyes. "They're Aurelians," Ethan muttered. Lyra nodded. "Yes, soldiers of the Obsidian Order, the last of my kind who still believe humans should be erased." One of the hunters raised a scanner, sweeping the cabin. A red beam flashed across the snow. It stopped, aimed directly at their door. "They found us," Ethan whispered. Lyra stepped closer, her voice calm but urgent. "We can't fight them head-on. Their weapons can melt metal. We need to overload the converter. Won't that destroy it?" "Yes," she said, "but it will buy us time." Ethan looked at the half-built Project Ember device. His hope, his purpose, and then back at Lyra. "Do it," he said. She nodded, placing her hands on the converter. Her skin began to glow brighter, pulsing with energy. The lights flickered, the air buzzing with static. Outside, the hunters moved closer. One raised his weapon, a spear that crackled with blue plasma. Then a blast of light erupted from the cabin. The battle for warmth. The explosion wasn't fire, it was heat. A massive wave of warmth blasted outward, melting snow and throwing the hunters off balance. Ethan fired through the doorway, bullets cutting through the steam-filled air. 2 hunters fell, their armor sparking. The third roared, charging forward. Ethan ducked behind the table as plasma bolts tore through the walls, leaving glowing holes. Lyra raised her hand, summoning a thin shield of blue light, weak, flickering. "It won't hold long," she shouted. Ethan rolled out, firing again. The last hunter leapt, slamming him to the floor. The rifle flew from his hands. The creature's helmet cracked open, revealing a pale, luminous face, alien, cold, expressionless. Ethan grabbed a shard of metal from the floor and drove it into the creature's throat. Blue blood splattered across the wooden boards. The hunter convulsed, then fell still. Silence returned. Only the fire crackled. Ethan lay on his back, chest heaving. Lyra rushed to him, kneeling. "You're hurt," she said, touching a burn on his arm. "I'll live," he muttered, wincing. "Are they dead?" She nodded. "For now." The cabin was a mess, walls scorched, air thick with smoke. The converter lay shattered on the floor, its light fading. Lyra picked up a broken piece, her face heavy with regret. "The ember core is damaged. We'll have to start again." Ethan sat up slowly, watching her. "We still have the data cube. That means we still have a chance." Lyra looked at him, surprised by his calm. "You'd still help me after this?" He gave a tired smile. "You saved me first. Now it's my turn." Her eyes softened. "Ethan Cole. Maybe humans are stronger than we ever believed." He chuckled quietly. "Or maybe we're just too stubborn to die." Outside, the horizon flickered with strange lights, green and blue auroras dancing across the sky. It was beautiful, but unnatural. Lyra's expression darkened. "It's starting," she whispered. "The planet's energy is collapsing faster than I thought." Ethan stood, his face hardening. Then we work faster. Together they began gathering what was left of the converter, their breath fogging in the icy air. The night outside was quiet again, but both knew the storm wasn't over, because now, the war wasn't between humans and aliens anymore, it was between life and extinction. The cabin was gone by morning. They had packed what little remained, the cracked data cube, the broken converter, and a few tools that still worked. Smoke curled from the roof where plasma bolts had burned holes through the wood. The air smelled of ash and snow. Ethan stood outside, tightening the straps of his bag. Lyra was beside him, silent, her silver hair whipping in the wind. The 3 alien hunters lay buried beneath the snow behind the cabin, a cold grave for colder enemies. Ethan stared at the horizon. The sun was faint, a weak circle behind gray clouds. "We can't stay here," he said. Lyra nodded. "The heat pulse we created will draw more of them, and the ember components we need are not here," he frowned. "Then where?" Lyra hesitated, then looked up at him. "Your old world's wounds still hide answers. You once built your prototypes under a military facility, right, didn't you?" Ethan's eyes narrowed. "You mean the Atlas bunker?" "Yes," she said softly. "We intercepted human signals years ago. The bunker survived, and it might still have what we need. The heart of Project Ember." Ethan stared at the mountains in the distance. That place was a ghost. He hadn't been there since the last war day, when the Aurelians bombed it from orbit. "I buried my past there," he muttered. Lyra looked at him, her eyes glowing faint blue. "Then it's time to dig it up again." The march to Atlas. They began the long journey before noon. The snow had hardened overnight, making their steps crunch sharply against the frozen ground. The wind cut through the trees, carrying faint howls that sounded too alive to be just the wind. Ethan led the way, using an old map burned into his memory. Lyra followed close behind, her movements quiet and fluid. She didn't seem to tire the way humans did, though her breathing grew heavy in the cold. They spoke little. The world around them had grown quiet. No birds, no animals, only the endless white of a dying earth. After hours of walking, Lyra broke the silence. "Why did you stop working on Ember?" Ethan's grip on his rifle tightened. "Because it was never meant to save anyone." Lyra looked confused. "What do you mean?" He sighed, his breath white in the air. "The government changed my designs. They said it was for defense, but they turned it into a weapon on a planetary torch. If it had been activated during the war, it could have burned half the Earth." Lyra stopped walking. "So it was built to destroy, not to save?" "Yes," he said quietly. "That's why I destroyed my lab and disappeared. I couldn't let them use it." Lyra's voice trembled. "And now you're trying to rebuild it, to save us all. Isn't that ironic?" Ethan gave a bitter smile. "Maybe redemption looks a lot like irony." They continued in silence until the mountains loomed ahead, jagged, dark, and ancient. Somewhere beneath that frozen rock was the Atlas bunker. The ghosts of Atlas by sunset, they found it. Half buried under ice, the entrance to the bunker looked like a scar on the earth, a thick metal door sealed by decades of silence. The faded symbol of the old Earth Federation was barely visible beneath frost and snow. Ethan brushed the snow off and examined the control panel. It was dead. No power, no response. Lyra stepped forward, placing her glowing hand against the panel. "Let me try." Her light spread through the metal like veins of energy. The old systems flickered, hissed, then powered on. With a low rumble, the massive door slowly began to open. Inside was darkness, deep, cold, endless. Ethan took a deep breath. "Welcome to the end of humanity's hope," he muttered. Lyra followed him inside. The air smelled like rust and dust. Frozen lights lined the ceiling, flickering weakly as they walked down the corridor. Walls were cracked and old screens displayed dead code. Then, as they turned a corner, Ethan froze. On the far wall in large red letters, someone had painted Project Ember, "Do not restart." Lyra looked at him. "What does it mean?" Ethan swallowed hard. "It means someone tried to finish what I started, and failed." The discovery, they reached the main control room, a massive chamber filled with machines frozen in time. In the center stood a huge cylindrical pod encased in glass and ice. Inside it, glowing faintly, was a golden sphere, the Ember core. Lyra stepped closer, her voice trembling. It's still active. Ethan placed his hand on the glass. The warmth pulsed faintly through it. A heartbeat of fire beneath ice. I can rebuild the stabilizer here, he said. If we link this core to your data, we might reignite the planetary field. Lyra smiled faintly. Then hope still lives. But before Ethan could answer, a sound echoed through the hall. A low metallic growl. The lights flickered again. Then a cold voice filled the room. Unauthorized presence detected. Reclaiming Ember prototype. Ethan's face went pale. That's not a person. From the shadows, shapes emerged. Tall, mechanical figures, glowing red eyes cutting through the dark. Human machines built decades ago to protect the facility, now turned into hunters. Lyra whispered, "Ethan, we're not alone." He raised his rifle, heart pounding. "Then let's make sure we're not the ones who freeze." The sound of metal echoed through the bunker. Each clang was slow, heavy, and deliberate, like something ancient was waking up after a long sleep. Red lights flickered to life, bathing the frozen walls in a warning glow. Ethan and Lyra stood shoulder to shoulder, surrounded by towering machines that moved with jerky precision. Their glowing eyes turned toward them, cold, red, unfeeling. "Security automatons," Ethan whispered. They were programmed to protect Project Ember at any cost. Lyra's voice was calm but tight. "And now they see us as intruders." The first machine lunged forward, its arm transforming into a plasma blade. Ethan fired his rifle. Sparks exploded, but the bullet only dented the metal. Another robot advanced from the side, heavy feet crushing the ice beneath. Lyra raised her hands. Blue energy pulsed from her palms, striking the machines with a wave of light. 2 staggered circuits burning, but more kept coming. "Fall back," Ethan shouted, dragging Lyra behind an overturned console. Metal shards flew past them, slicing into the walls. Lyra's energy shield flickered. "There are too many." Ethan's eyes darted to the glowing sphere, the Ember core still pulsing behind its glass. "If we can power it up, it'll release enough heat to fry their systems." Lyra looked at him, shocked. "It could also kill us." He gave a grim smile. "Yeah, well, we're running out of options." Igniting hope, Ethan ran across the room, bullets sparking behind him as the automatons fired. He reached the control panel beside the core, a mess of frozen levers and shattered screens. Lyra followed, sliding across the floor, her silver skin glowing brighter as she absorbed what little energy remained from the data cube. "I can link the core manually," she said, "but someone has to open the valve release." "Where?" Ethan asked. She pointed to a ladder leading up the platform. "Up there. But once it opens, the core will overheat. It has to be stabilized from below." He nodded without hesitation. "Then you do the link." "I'll handle the valve." Lyra grabbed his arm. "If you open it manually, the radiation could..." He cut her off, eyes fierce. "If I don't, we both freeze. Just trust me, Lyra." Her hand lingered on his for a second, soft, glowing, trembling. Then she nodded. "I trust you, human." The flame returns. Ethan climbed the ladder as the bunker shook under the weight of the machine's advance. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Lyra stood by the core, her palms pressed to the glass. Her blue light merged with the golden glow inside, forming a swirl of warmth and energy that filled the room like sunlight breaking through clouds. The automatons hesitated, their sensors flickering in confusion. Ethan reached the valve at the top and pulled. It didn't move. Rusted solid. He gritted his teeth, using all his strength. Below, Lyra's voice echoed through the roar of energy. "Now, Ethan, open it!" He shouted back, "I'm trying!" Then with one last pull, the valve snapped free, and the core roared to life. A wave of heat exploded outward, slamming into the walls. Ice melted in seconds. The red lights flickered, then died as the machines convulsed and fell, their circuits frying under the sudden surge. Lyra screamed as blue light coursed through her body, connecting her mind to the core. "It's working," she cried. "The energy field is stabilizing." Ethan climbed down, the heat burning his skin. "Shut it down before it blows." "I can't," she gasped. "It needs balance. One of us must stay connected until it completes the cycle." Ethan froze. "What are you saying?" Lyra turned to him, her eyes glowing brighter, tears forming like liquid crystal. "If I disconnect, it collapses. But if I stay, it will consume me." He shook his head. "No, we'll find another way." She smiled softly, her voice trembling. You gave warmth to someone who didn't deserve it. You gave me a reason to believe in humans again. He stepped forward, desperate. Lyra, don't... Her hand reached out and touched his face. Goodbye, Ethan Cole, my human warmth. Then she closed her eyes. Her body glowed brighter and brighter until she became pure light, merging with the core. The golden sphere flared like a sun reborn, sending a wave of energy that shook the earth itself. Outside, across the frozen mountains, snow began to melt. The clouds broke. For the first time in years, the sun's warmth touched the land again. After the storm hours later, silence returned. Ethan awoke on the cold floor, surrounded by steam. The machines were dead. The air was warm. He crawled toward the core chamber, now empty. The glass was cracked, the light inside fading slowly. Lyra, he whispered. There was no answer. Only a faint shimmer, a tiny spark of blue light floating in the air. It drifted toward him and landed on his hand, glowing softly before fading into his skin. He looked up at the world beyond the bunker door. Sunlight spilling over the snow, melting it into rivers. The cold was ending. Ethan stood quietly, eyes glistening. You did it, he murmured. You saved us. He walked out into the thawing world, the warmth touching his face for the first time in years. Behind him, deep in the bunker, the ember core pulsed once more, a heartbeat echoing through the earth. And somewhere in that light, her voice whispered faintly, "Share your warmth, human, so no one ever freezes again." The end.